This is Radio Free Hillsdale, 101.7 FM. I'm Scot Bertram, and with me today is State Senator Mike Shirkey. Find him at senatormikeshirkey.com. He is the Senate Majority Leader. Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome, Scott. And it just occurred to me this morning that those are three wonderful words: Radio Free and Hillsdale. And when they're all combined together, it makes me smile. So I have a lot of radio interviews I'm privileged to do throughout the week, and this is one of my most favorite. So
well, thank you
for letting me do so.
We appreciate your time and availability and over these past years, and look forward to continuing, of course. It is great to have you on Radio Free Hillsdale. So, Senator, update us if you could. Numbers change by the day. We look at trends. Certainly, I saw some numbers from the weekend as we record right now that looked awfully promising from Sunday in terms of number of cases and number of deaths across the state. We want to see any deaths, of course, but it looks like things are moving in the right direction in Michigan.
Yeah, I think all the data suggests that, and it gives us reason to have some optimism that our governor will start to, relieve some of the pressure on restraints in Michigan. In fact, just this morning I got a update in terms of what she may announce today in a press conference, and I'm not going to jump her on that. But all I can tell you is if what I was told a moment ago actually occurs in the press conference, I think it'll be greeted with very, very good news. So it's one thing that we just still don't know, and we won't know until we've got full 2020 hindsight and have had enough time to study the data, is whether what we're experiencing now, in other words, lower infection rates and lower growth rates and, of course, fewer deaths, did our extreme restrictions affect that curve or not? And I'm not saying that in a critical way, other than we have to know the answer to that question. So if it did, then we know what to do next time, and if it didn't, we know what not to do next time, or a combination thereof. So it's we still have a lot of learning to do on how we responded to this virus, and I'm hoping that at every level of government, from the federal level all the way down to the local level, that we have enough courage to be able to be transparent and do some serious lessons learned as a result of what we've experienced together.
Now, the lawsuit that was filed continues to move. You mentioned that the governor might make some announcements this week, has made some announcements previously in this month. Even if we open back up to a large extent, this lawsuit and what we find, or what the court finds in this lawsuit, still will be important moving forward, correct? Absolutely.
And there's a couple of laws in the books that tend to create confusion and conflict. And I mentioned to you previous to going live on here with you that I'm limited to how much I can say, but that's really the essence of it, is that we believe there's a strong constitutional requirement that the legislature be involved in all decisions in a state of emergency after a fashion. And we believe that any governor, needs to have the ability to call a state of emergency to react to an emergency, but it cannot extend for perpetuity unilaterally. And so that's the essence of the suit. And the legislature has ideas on how to resolve it, but the way we would resolve it would require a governor's signature.
Right.
And that would be problematic at this stage. And so, despite our efforts to want to work with her, in this case, that's been rejected all along, and so we felt that on behalf of the nearly 10 million people in the state of Michigan, we had no choice but to sue, and so that's what we've done.
Senator, we've had a couple of protests in Lansing over the governor's orders, and has received both statewide and national media attention for a handful of people who are showing up, certainly not the majority of people who are showing up. You're far closer to that situation than I am. How would you describe those people who have been showing up in Lansing?
Well, I've been in attendance for all of them. In some cases out on the lawn, but at least always in the Capitol. And my observations are that 99% of the folks who are there because they feel passionate about the trend of infringement upon rights, and And then there's the 1%. There's just that one small fraction who don't know how to behave, and they assume some things that they shouldn't assume, and they assume positions of intimidation, and they make comments that are really dangerous. And then the biased media, and I say that very purposefully, never interview those that are there and try to understand their legitimacy and try to understand their purpose, and only highlight those that are, displaying certain kinds of signs and so forth. So it's too bad. It's a shame. And by the way, this has led me to actually reach out to some of the militia leaders personally, and I've met with 5 leaders of 5 different militia groups. There's a number of militia groups in the state of Michigan. I mean, I don't even know that we know how many there are.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a handful or 2 handfuls that are typically involved, and we're having an ongoing conversation, and it was all derived from them being upset with me by calling a very small fraction of those protesting jackasses. And I don't deny saying it, and I won't change the word, because that small percentage indeed did act inappropriately, and unfortunately that's what the media picks up on. And so I'm challenging some of these groups to help me help themselves, and maybe starting with establishing codes of conduct. Mm-hmm. Each individual group a code of conduct that they can hold themselves accountable to, and then if they feel like it, they can make it public, and everybody can be held accountable to a code of conduct. So it's been a fascinating process the last couple of weeks, and we're going to continue to meet with them, and they serve a very important role. And that important role is this, Scott. We get our rights from God, and government is supposed to support and secure those rights. Mm-hmm. But government has natural inertia to it, and anybody who serves in government is part of that. So I'm guilty. And that inertia is sometimes we tend to move toward thinking that the rights come from government. And when that starts to happen, we need people protesting. We need people standing up and saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! This is beginning to make the line fuzzy between where our rights come from and who's responsible for protecting those rights." And that's precisely the role that I think citizens and specifically militia should play.
Senator Mike Shirkey, let me ask a corollary to the protest question. We've now had conversations about whether or not weapons should be allowed in the Capitol, and there's a question about who has the authority even to act on that if the Michigan Capitol Commission does. What, if anything, do you think needs to be done, and who, in your mind, has the authority to act?
I don't believe the Capitol Commission, as it was intended when it was formed a few years back, in any way was envisioned to be responsible for these kinds of decisions. For instance, guns and open carry in the Capitol. And I believe it was cowardly, and I said it publicly, that for the Attorney General and the Governor to stand behind the Capitol Commission and try to force them to make that decision. I think it was unfair. I think a conversation is worthy. Michigan has a long-standing open carry law, mm-hmm. and I have no interest in challenging and changing that law. But I do think there's room for at least a conversation on as to whether there needs to be open carry in certain sections of the Capitol, very specifically the galleries of the 2 chambers. So we're just exploring that idea now, and that I think the pressure has been relieved a little bit from the Capitol Commission, mm-hmm. and I think that time and some conversations and meeting with different groups, this is no different than any other issue that has special interest groups on both sides, and then determining whether or not any action is actually warranted. One of the folks that I referred to as a jackass was a fellow that stood in the gallery in the Senate in a ready to fire position, and then was asked by a media person, "Why are you here?" And his response was to make sure they vote correctly. Well, that is, in my mind, undeniably a brandishing comment, mm-hmm. and along with the stature in which, and so those kinds of things need to be challenged, and they need to be, checked. So there is room, Scott, for conversation about certain areas of the Capitol where open carry may not be necessary. But I'm not intending in any way to affect. And that, by the way, that could be done by rules in both chambers. I'm not intending in any way to take up Michigan's open carry law.
State Senator Mike Shirkey, one more question. We still don't know the exact hits to the budget numbers in Michigan, but it certainly will be large, billions likely. There was a story recently in the Detroit News about Michigan schools perhaps looking at a cut to the existing school aid fund or what might be in next year's budget. How do you begin to have these conversations about budgeting in the future when the fallout is still uncertain? Is it possible that school funding is impacted in the coming year?
We have two problems, Scott. One problem is short-term. That's the existing current budget year that ends the end of September. And we have the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference this past Friday when the Senate Fiscal Agency, the House Fiscal Agency, and the State Budget Office get together with Treasury and try to reach a consensus on what the budget implications are for both this budget that we're in and the next year's budget. Mm-hmm. And in this year's budget, they're suggesting that it's, in the $3 to $3.4 billion range. And what's significant about that is that we have to make those kinds of adjustments because we have to have a balanced budget in a short period of time, like 5 months. And we are waiting anxiously for the governor to issue an executive order to adjust the budgets, at which time then the legislature would engage into a conversation and negotiation on how to best do so. And that's this year's budget. It'll have minimal effect on schools because the school year has effectively been canceled and so forth. Next year's budget, however, is a similar scope in terms of the projections of negative impact on revenue, and that may in fact have an impact on school revenue. The highest priorities will always be, as far as as long as I'm around, public safety and school education. And so we'll try to affect the necessary changes in spending to minimize that on public safety in schools. I cannot guarantee that it won't be zero. That it will be zero. I think it probably will be something, but we'll work very hard to make it as small as possible, and that just takes time, Scott.
Senator Mike Shirkey, find him online, senatormikeshirkey.com, the 16th State Senate District. That's Branch, Hillsdale, and Jackson counties, and, of course, the Senate Majority Leader as well. You can find him on Facebook, too, if needed. Senator, thank you so much for joining us here on Radio Free Hillsdale, 101.7 FM.